This is Michael Alexander Gloss, who was killed in Ukraine about a year ago while fighting for the Russian military. What really makes Michael's story stand out here is his mom is a current CIA deputy director. Now, Michael joins a long list of very notable characters that have left the United States to fight alongside Russian forces. We've made a video about that in the past. It'll be linked in the description below. But of course, we've got Wilmer Poilamota, a former U.S. service member who fled the United States as he was awaiting trial on child pornography charges and has been featured in quite a few Russian media spots since arriving over there. We've got John McIntyre, who was kicked out of the United States Army, went over to Ukraine, got in a lot of trouble there, and eventually defected to the Russian side where he thought he was some sort of Jason Bourne or something. I don't know. He hasn't been heard from in like 2 years. And then, of course, we've got Russell Tejas Bentley, an American expat who went over long before the current invasion of Ukraine began, joined the Russian military, and about a year ago was allegedly raped and killed by Russian soldiers who thought he was an American spy. So that right there is the company that Michael was keeping. Now, we know that Michael was killed on April 4th, 2024. His family reported the news in an obituary. They say the exact circumstances of Michael's death remain unknown, but it's believed that he died fighting with the 106th Airborne Division, the Russian 106th Airborne Division in Donetsk. Now, I should mention that as of now, this story is single source reporting, so we're only getting it from one outlet. We'll see if there's more layered on top here, but of course, pretty notable. Not just an American joining the Russian forces and fighting against Ukraine, but of course, with his mother having such a significant current position in the U.S. government. That's got to be a problem for her at this point. But anyways, digging into that aspect of this, they say Michael was born into a military family. His mother, Julianne Galina Gloss, graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy and became the first woman to serve as a Naval Academy Brigade Commander in 1991. She worked in intelligence for more than 30 years, serving in the U.S. Navy, and held various positions in the military, civil service, and industry. Julianne Gloss has spent the last 6 years building a career with the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. In February 2024, she was named the CIA's Deputy Director for Digital Innovation. So she's been with the CIA now in this role for more than a year, and it sounds like if his death was confirmed on April 2024, it's unclear if the family knew he was actually in the Russian military at that time, but they definitely found out when his obituary was announced. They say Michael's father, Larry Gloss, is a veteran of the U.S. Navy. He now heads a company that creates security software for clients, including the U.S. government, the U.S. Department of Defense, and other NATO countries. This isn't the kind of thing that like strips people of their clearances, but it's going to cause some headaches at the very least when you have a family member that has voluntarily joined an adversarial military like this. Now, Michael's story is interesting because he's like all over the map. They say he went to college for a couple years, the College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor, Maine. He was there when the Russian invasion of Ukraine kicked off, and his college, and apparently Michael as well, took part in demonstrations in support of Ukraine. We've got some pictures of that here. But then he just became like a full-blown activist. He was arrested, or at least maybe fined at different times, taking part in climate change protests, abortion ban protests, and eventually the guy was like, enough, I'm out of here, no more college, and starts to travel the world. He was posting pictures and talking about living for periods of time in like Italy, Israel, Turkey, Bulgaria, all over the place. At one point, he started to make this move into Crimea, and there was some pushback, people saying like, hey, it's a war. And I guess at the time he was consuming a lot of media from Gaza and was getting very, very upset with the U.S. position in that war and started to really align more with like these BRICS statements about how the U.S. is falling and it's going to be Russia and their allies kind of taking the lead, which we do see in a lot of Russian propaganda. But next thing you know, it sounds like Michael has his next known address after he's been in Russia for a period of time as a recruiting center. And we've got pictures of him going through this training in military outfits or military uniforms. They say in the report here, they say they spoke with a Russian man who completed his mandatory military service in the 137th Airborne Regiment and knew Michael well. Pyotr is what they're calling him. They changed his name. Said that Gloss had his own vision of how he could be useful at the front. And he had come up with these sketches about construction and engineering that he thought he could like come into the Russian army and say, I've got this background, a couple years of college. Let me show you how to build something better. That is pretty idealistic for a military like Russia right now. I mean, it's pretty idealistic for like the U.S. military to say, hey, I've got a couple years of this thing. Let me show up just as a basic infantryman and let them know I've got this skill set. They're going to want to move me up and get me out there doing some important work. And no, here's a rifle. get ready to join the assault unit, because it seems like that's what happened. The last time Pyotr saw Michael was in December 2023, and he said, if I'm not mistaken, after his training, he was assigned to an assault unit. And we're going to talk more about those assault units here in a minute, but very high casualty rates, very high attrition, and that's the last time anybody heard from him or saw Michael. Doesn't sound like his body's been recovered. Not entirely clear how he was killed or anything like that. He kind of went silent on social media, but nonetheless, we've got the most recent version of an American going over to fight for Russia being killed by Ukrainian forces. I'll link that story in the description below if you want to read it in its entirety. It's pretty interesting. But we've also got some pretty wild stories here. A Russian ammo dump deep inside of Russia, 60 kilometers past Moscow, was deleted earlier this week by Russia. Yeah. But before diving into that, first check out this new app called SITREP by Artorias. Hey, so I'm really excited to show you guys this. This is SITREP powered by Artorias, which is the world's fastest intelligence alert system. I mean, this is the kind of thing that would not have been available to the general public even just a couple of years ago, and now it is straight to your phone, which is wild. But SITREP is powered by AI, fed by real-time OSINT, or open source intelligence, and is trusted by those who can't afford to be wrong. I mean, we're talking about missile launches, political crises, border crossing, supply chain sabotage, and more. So here's a quick look at my personal watch list inside of the app. This helps me keep an eye on things happening in Ukraine, Israel, Syria, Taiwan, and more. I mean, you can build this out however you want. But here's the deal. With SITREP, you'll know this type of stuff before the mainstream news, before it hits the headlines, honestly, before some governments. Look, business leaders, hedge fund managers, intelligence experts, and government officials, they're not waiting for tomorrow's news. Neither should you. So download SITREP today on Apple or Google devices. Links to both stores are in the description below. And if you do, let me know what you think. Because I know I'm biased. This is a sponsored post, but man, it's a pretty impressive tool. So thank you so much to Artorias for sponsoring today's video. All right, so what you're looking at here are pictures and videos of the 51st GRAU arsenal that was destroyed this past Monday or Tuesday, I think it was. This is 60 kilometers east of Moscow, which means it's at least 500 kilometers from the Ukrainian front lines, which, look, that is within range for Ukrainian drones. So as soon as this started coming out, the immediate thought, myself included, was this must have been a Ukrainian drone strike. You know, an ammo depot is very much in line with what Ukraine has been hitting. This is in the range of what Ukraine has been targeting. Not entirely sure that's what happened, though. Now, what we know in terms of what was being stored here, according to Russian sources, they say a bunch of artillery shells, missiles of various types, including Iskander, Toshka-U, Kinzhal, ammunition for the Pantsir, S-1, S-300, S-400 systems, as well as Grad, Smerch, and Uragan rockets. So like everything that's big and goes boom, maybe not bombs. That seems like the only thing that wasn't mentioned there. Nonetheless, looking at these explosions, it's pretty sizable. Military informant said, quote, until now, there has been no information about a possible enemy strike. So the version about a violation of safety regulations during the loading and unloading of ammunition seems the most likely. And the Russian Ministry of Defense went on to confirm this, saying that the ammunition caught fire at a warehouse. And when this was coming out, I wasn't sure. Is that better or worse for Russia? Like, imagine Russia can say whatever they want about this. Is it better to say, some Ukrainian drones got through? Or is it better to say we dropped some ammunition and blew up this entire depot? Because my God, I mean, first off, there were reports in Russian media about unexploded ordnance and ordnance set to explode landing 10 kilometers away. That's how big this explosion was. It shot pieces of weaponry 10 kilometers away. And we've got some videos of those rounds randomly impacting on random security cameras throughout this portion of the country, which is wild. And, you know, the EOD cleanup here is going to be an absolute nightmare because you've got this massive area that you have to go through and find out not just what impacted where, but what is still live. What could still go boom if you come near it, right? Now, we do have some before and after imagery showing this ammo dump. And, I mean, what are we going with here? 60%, 70% gone? And it's not just the piece that, like, literally there's no portion of that ammo dump still remaining. So, like, that's all gone. But technically, all of the ammunition anywhere near that blast is probably questionable at this point. In the United States, we would probably do away with it and say that is unstable. You can't be that close to a heat source, an explosion this big, those shock waves, and say that nothing at all damaged any of the other ammunition. So unless it goes through pretty significant testing, you'd probably do away with that as well. Not entirely certain Russia's going to do that. They'll probably still continue to send it to the front. But nonetheless, this was a pretty significant self-inflicted wound by the Russians, in which, again, Ukraine has not claimed responsibility for hitting it. So by all accounts, this was a Russian error getting rid of one of their own ammo depots. Now, shifting over to some other issues that the Russians are literally running into right now, it's Ukrainian drones. As we've seen kind of a Russian offensive start to come together this spring, David Kirchenko put together a really interesting article and thread over on X. I'm going to link his profile in this thread in the description below. He's a Ukrainian-American journalist that does some really excellent reporting from this war. And he says Ukraine's drone wall is ready for Russia's spring offensive. As Russia launches its spring offensive, Ukrainian soldiers are confident their drones will give the invaders hell. And I just want to say, I hope the United States is paying attention to stuff like this. I don't get the idea that we have very much at this point, and maybe we don't go this direction, and this is not the type of operation that we carry out. But we need to know that other countries are looking at this and may pursue the same strategy, because this is, look, little by little, and all of a sudden you've got an entirely different war, and that's what we're looking at right here. He says Russia is hurling waves of troops forward. This includes Russian soldiers on crutches, on wheelchairs. We've got some videos of that. I'll show that here in a second. It's unbelievable. CNN reported that, quote, Russia is recycling wounded troops, sending some to the front line on crutches. It's hard to watch at times when you see that, but they're there. Now, are they the point man in assault? Probably not. Hopefully not. But they're still close enough to the front where they're in drone range, which what they're saying right now is that Ukraine is laying down this 15-kilometer kill zone of autonomous drones, and they're trying to extend it out to 40 kilometers. And they say the goal here is to deny Russian forces the ability to make undetected moves across the front. Now, from the opening days of the war, the challenge has been amassing any sort of large formations to catch the enemy off guard because of drones. We can see a long ways, and it's hard to put together a sizable force without being detected. Ukraine is transitioning from, it's not just we want to see them, we want to be able to constantly kill and destroy anything in that area. So once they're spotted, you can see a swarm, if you will, probably the wrong term to use here, but a lot of FPV-style drones, maybe bombers, coming over that target and absolutely destroying anything well before it is even close to direct fire range of the Ukrainian positions. He says Ukrainian drones now dominate the skies and trenches. Some frontline zones are held almost entirely by drone units. As one soldier told me, quote, we're holding the line with drones. There's barely anyone in the trenches. And it makes sense in certain areas. Why would you have soldiers forward? Now, that could run into an issue if there's a large enough Russian assault that they push through and all of a sudden you are engaged in that direct fire combat. But if that's the case, you have to assume or hope, in this case, that what Ukraine has done is moved their soldiers back into certain areas where they can be tapped into as kind of a QRF. And if there's a breakthrough or a push in certain areas, those infantry can be redeployed quickly to kind of to patch any holes in the line. They say Ukraine is producing 200,000 drones a month, up from 20,000 just a year ago. Most are built using commercial components, often open source software and raw battlefield urgency. This isn't defense industry as usual. It's wartime innovation at Silicon Valley speed. And this is, I think the right way to say this, like, I'm jealous of that. I don't want all of the stuff that's happening in Ukraine to happen here, but you can see this urgency that Ukraine's been really good at this. And we've seen it from the Russian side as well, but I would argue more of the innovation has really come on the Ukrainian side, just given their limitations. And you can see the urgency with across industry, right? The volunteers stepping up to do this and just finding ways to make it work. Nothing drives innovation more than trying to find a way to stay alive. And we don't have that right now. We are at a disadvantage in that sense. We have seen that historically in past U.S. conflicts where you see major innovation spurts happen during times of war. We're just not there right now. So, look, I like that our ally is coming up with this. Hopefully we stay close enough with Ukraine in the future to where we're able to leverage some of this technology and innovation they're coming up with. Their defense minister said, quote, we have our own Silicon Valley and garages across the country. We have ingenious researchers and engineers building things no one has ever made. He adds, while Western procurement cycles typically stretch over years, Ukraine can turn ideas into field-ready weapons in months. Wartime necessity has turned Ukraine into perhaps the world's most agile military innovation ecosystem. Much of this progress is volunteer-driven. Again, it's something that you just do not get outside of a conflict. And I would even argue here that because Ukraine is feeling the impact of this war more day to day than Russia, you're seeing more of this innovation driven in Ukraine than you are Russia. But it's nonetheless, we're seeing Ukraine leaps and bounds in how war is being fought. Again, whether this is something that the United States adopts, as of today, I find it hard to believe that we are anywhere close to standing up units that will defend an entire front with drones like Ukraine is doing. But we have to at least acknowledge the fact that that is working and it's happening on today's battlefields, and be ready to combat that. Whether we're on the offensive or the defensive, this is a real thing now. Now, we just got news earlier today that another Russian general, was killed in Moscow, which raised some questions among Russian mill bloggers saying, hey, what's going on? Why is Ukraine able to do this to us and we're not able to do this to them? Which was an interesting take, but nonetheless, we got news that Major General Yaroslav Moskalik, probably butchered that, has been eliminated by an IED in the Moscow region. He was leaving his apartment block when a nearby vehicle not belonging to him exploded. The body of the Russian general flew several meters through the air and ended up at the roadside. This was not just any general. He was the deputy head of the main operations directorate for the general staff of the Russian armed forces. That's pretty senior. And not only that, it sounds like he was in line and probably going to be picked as the next head of the National Defense Control Center. So he was up for promotion. This was a successful general. He was well-liked, maybe is not the right way to put it, but he was on the fast track inside of Russia, and he was clearly targeted here. They say, according to the investigation, what they know right now, and I've not seen any comments from Ukraine, they say an IED was planted in the car that was remotely detonated as the officer was exiting the building. The device was filled with shrapnel. They say he was one of the most competent and demanding officers in the main operations directorate. And again, you're talking about a Russian general killed in Moscow. And it doesn't sound like, from everything I've seen at this point, there is no collateral damage in terms of civilian casualties. I mean, the vehicle's clearly gone, but no other personnel from what I've seen at this point were even wounded, let alone killed. They sticking with Rybar reporting here. They say, given the level of the target and method of execution, there's almost no doubt about the involvement of the Ukrainian special services. And this is where some Russian mill bloggers have taken it recently. It's not, I mean, that's of course where you're going to look in a case like this. And Ukraine has proven that they are capable of carrying out operations like this deep inside of Russia. This one, of course, inside of Moscow. But the pushback by a lot of Russian mill bloggers today is, first off, like, they're pissed because this was clearly a big win for Ukraine. But also, why is that not happening inside of Ukraine? Like, is it looser security in Russia right now? Do they not have the assets in Kyiv that maybe they thought they did? Interesting that that's kind of bubbling to the surface amidst all of this. But nonetheless, a pretty significant development, and you can probably expect to see more of that, especially if the United States walks away entirely from this conflict. That's something that my understanding, my belief, is that the United States has largely capped Ukraine's kind of unconventional capabilities like this to strike inside of Russia. If we are no longer directly involved with providing any sort of assistance to Ukraine, which looks like that very much might be in the cards, I would expect to see an uptick in this type of assassination of senior Russian military leaders throughout the country. But that's all I got for now. Again, be sure to check out SITREP by Artorias in the description below. Such a cool company, and really proud of what they've been able to put together here. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.